Tonight, you'll hear 3 disturbing true stories that all share one chilling theme: being watched when you least expect it. These are not tales of ghosts or legends, but real experiences of ordinary people who discovered they were never truly alone. From hidden figures at the window, to strange rituals in an abandoned church, to whispers outside a family's tent. Each story will leave you questioning the darkness around you. If you enjoy these kinds of unsettling true encounters, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next night of terror. Story 1. The Invisible Neighbor. I used to live in a small rented room on the 2nd floor of an old building near the train station. It wasn't much. Just one room, bare walls, and a single window that opened onto a forgotten balcony. Nobody ever went out there. The iron railings were rust, time to 6.5s. The tiles cracked, and from the street below, you could hardly even tell the balcony still existed. But for me, it was simply part of the view. At least, that's what I thought in the beginning. At first, life there was ordinary. I worked late shifts and usually returned home around midnight. I would drop my keys on the counter, turn on the lights, and enjoy a quiet meal before bed. But then, slowly, something began to change. It started with the faintest sound, like the tap of a fingernail against glass. I remember the first time it happened. I froze mid-step. The noise came from the direction of the window, from that balcony I never used. I convinced myself it was nothing. Perhaps the wind had loosened a piece of metal. Time, Jewel 6. Or maybe a branch had been blown against the glass. Yet the very next night, as soon as I turned on the light, the same sound returned. A soft scrape, followed by a deliberate tap, almost as if someone was dragging a fingernail slowly across the window before knocking twice to remind me they were there. By the 3rd night, I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a coincidence. Every time I came home late and turned on that light, the sound would come. The rhythm was too precise, too human. And what disturbed me most was the timing. Never before I arrived. Never at random during the night. Only in those first moments when I walked inside, tired and alone. I began to test it. One evening, I left the lights off and sat silently in the dark, watching the window. For half an hour, nothing happened. But the second I flipped the switch, the sound returned, louder this time, as if whoever or whatever was out there had grown impatient. That was when a thought began to creep into my mind. Someone was waiting for me. I checked the balcony door from the hallway. It was sealed shut, covered in dust and chains of spider webs, untouched for years. No one should have been able to reach it. And yet, night after night, the sound continued, tapping gently, almost playfully, as though reminding me that I was never truly alone in that room. One night, when I thought I had finally grown numb to the strange tapping, something new happened, something that made my blood run cold. I came home later than usual. The streets were empty, and the building seemed quieter than ever. As I stepped inside my room, I noticed a small piece of paper wedged tightly under the frame of my window. At first, I assumed it was nothing more than a scrap blown in from the wind. But when I unfolded it, my hands began to shake. Written in uneven letters were 3 simple words: I see you. I cannot describe the feeling that followed. My heart felt as if it dropped into my stomach, and suddenly every shadow in the room seemed alive. That balcony was supposed to be sealed, abandoned for years. No one should have been able to step foot out there, let alone slip a note through my window. Yet the message was clear. Someone had been close enough to watch me, close enough to reach inside the space I thought was mine. The rest of that night passed in a blur. I barely slept, and every sound made me jolt upright. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I went straight to the building manager, voice shaking, and demanded that he open the balcony so we could check. At first, he laughed it off, saying no one had a key and the balcony was unsafe. But I pressed harder, almost begging, until he finally agreed. When he unlocked the heavy door and pushed it open, a stale smell of damp air rushed out. The floor was cracked, moss and rainwater staining every inch of the cement. It looked like no one had walked there in years, except for one thing. Right in front of my window stood a single plastic chair, old, time 00.65s, weathered, and facing directly into my room. It was the only object on that balcony, placed in such a deliberate position that it sent chills down my spine. The manager swore he had no idea how it got there, no idea who might have a key. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew better. Someone had been sitting there, night after night, close enough to study me, close enough to let me hear their nails against the glass. The note wasn't just a threat, it was proof. I moved out the following week. And even now, years later, whenever I pass by an empty window in an old building, I can't help but wonder if there's someone, hidden in the dark, waiting with a chair and a message for the next unlucky tenant. Story 2. The Abandoned Church Basement. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Texas, the kind of place where everybody knew each other and nothing truly exciting ever seemed to happen. But on the edge of town, there stood a building that broke the silence, a church that had been abandoned for years. Its paint had long since peeled away. The bell tower leaned slightly, as if tired of holding itself up. And the basement windows were so clouded with dust, you couldn't see through them. Most people avoided it. But for us, a group of restless teenagers with too much curiosity, the church became a subject of late-night conversations and nervous dares. It started with my friend Danny. Every evening, on his way back from work, he passed the church. One night he told us he noticed something strange, a flash of light coming from the basement window. At first, he assumed it was just a reflection from a passing car. But the following night, the light came again, a sharp, unmistakable beam, like the quick sweep of a flashlight. Naturally, we laughed it off. Someone probably broke in, maybe a drifter using the basement for shelter. After all, the church had been empty for years. It wasn't hard to believe someone desperate had found a way inside. But what made Danny uneasy was the timing. The light only appeared late at night, never during the day, and always in short bursts, as if whoever held it didn't want to be noticed. The more he described it, the less funny it seemed. I tried to picture it, an empty church, dark and forgotten, and then a sudden gleam moving behind dirty glass. The image stuck with me. Questions began to form. If it was just a homeless person, why stay hidden? Why not come out during the day? Or at least make it obvious the place was being used? And more importantly, what exactly were they doing down there that required a flashlight every single night? Our curiosity grew into obsession. We began planning to check it out ourselves. Still, a part of me hesitated. Logic told me Danny was probably right. Someone harmless, just seeking shelter. But deep down, something didn't add up. Abandoned places hold their own kind of silence, a silence that amplifies the smallest details. And if there truly was someone down there, sitting in that forgotten basement, it meant they chose the darkness on purpose. That thought alone was enough to keep me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what waited beneath the floorboards of that church. One night, after weeks of wondering, we finally gave in to curiosity. Armed with nothing more than flashlights and shaky courage, we decided to see for ourselves what was inside that church. The front doors were chained shut, but a broken window near the basement gave us a way in. Crawling through the dust and cobwebs, we landed on the cold floor, and for the first time, we were standing inside the place that had haunted our conversations for so long. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of damp wood and something else. Wax, like burned candles. Our lights cut through the darkness, and almost immediately we saw them. Melted stubs of candles scattered across the floor. Their wax hardened in strange pools. The walls, once plain, were covered in crude drawings. Dozens of eyes, uneven circles with black pupils, all staring back at us. And among them, twisted symbols none of us recognized, scratched deep into the plaster as if carved with a knife. We moved deeper, our footsteps echoing in the silence. In the far corner sat a rotting wooden table. What lay on it made my stomach tighten. Piled carelessly were notebooks, old and worn, filled with page after page of names of families from our own neighborhood. I flipped one open, my hand trembling, and at the bottom of the page, scrawled in jagged handwriting, were the words, "Watched for 3 months." It felt like ice water rushing through my veins. Whoever was here wasn't just passing through. They had been keeping track of us, studying us, writing about us. I looked at my friends, and in their faces, I saw the same fear that now gripped me. We didn't stay a second longer. We ran out, barely speaking until we reached the street. The next morning, we reported everything to the police. They promised to investigate, but when they finally let us return, the basement had changed. The candles, the symbols, the notebooks, gone. Every trace of what we had seen had vanished. The only thing left behind was the faint smell of burnt wood. Time, 06 was lingering in the stale air, and a single jacket tossed across the floor. The fabric was damp, as though someone had left only minutes before. That was the moment we understood. Whoever had been down there knew we had come, and they weren't finished watching. Story 3. The isolated lake campground a few summers ago. My family decided to take a camping trip. Just the 4 of us. My parents, my younger sister, and me. We chose a remote lake far away from the usual tourist spots. It was quiet, untouched, the kind of place where the water was so still it looked like glass, and the forest pressed in so close you felt cut off from the rest of the world. At first, that silence felt peaceful, but over time, it started to feel heavy, almost too complete. Time, 6 as if the woods were holding its breath and waiting. The first night passed without incident. We cooked by the fire, told stories, and eventually crawled into our tents. But on the second night, something happened that still chills me to remember. I had just drifted off to sleep when a sound pulled me awake. At first it was faint, almost like the breeze moving through the tree. Time, 9 5. But then I realized It wasn't the wind. It was a voice. A whisper. So close it seemed to press against the thin wall of my tent. "Do you hear it?" The words repeated, soft and deliberate, again and again. "Do you hear it?" I froze. My first thought was that it must have been my sister talking in her sleep. But when I strained to listen, I could hear her steady breathing from across the tent. Both my parents were asleep in the other one. No one was outside. That whisper was coming from someone I didn't know. I lay there, holding my breath, too afraid to move. Each time the words came, I felt as though whoever spoke them was leaning closer, almost brushing against the fabric of the tent. The rhythm of it was wrong. Slow, patient. As if whoever it was didn't care how long it took to be heard. For what felt like hours, I stayed still, my mind racing with explanations. Maybe a hiker had wandered near our site. Maybe someone was playing a cruel prank. But deep down, I knew none of those answers fit. This was late, far past midnight, and we were miles from the nearest trail. Nobody should have been there. Eventually, the whisper stopped, leaving behind only the sound of the forest and the pounding of my own heartbeat. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I kept staring at the zipper of the tent, terrified it might slide open. And though I never saw the person behind that voice, I will never forget the way it sounded. Calm, steady, and far too close. The next morning, I tried to convince myself that what I'd heard was just a dream, but the evidence waiting outside proved otherwise. Around our tent, pressed deep into the damp soil, were footprints, bare human footprints. They circled not only our tent, but also the one where my parents slept. The trail of prints wandered across the campsite before vanishing into the tree line, as if someone had paced there for hours, watching. Seeing them made my stomach twist. Whoever whispered to me in the night had been real, and they had come terrifyingly close. We argued about what to do. My father wanted to believe it was a drifter passing through. My mother was shaken, but tried to stay calm for our sake. As for me, I couldn't shake the memory of that whisper. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, as though the person wanted me to know they were there. We should have packed up right then, but fear and denial held us in place. Instead, we agreed to stick it out one more night, keeping a lantern on and the fire burning longer. That night, sleep was impossible. The forest pressed in on us, every rustle of leaves amplified. Sometime after midnight, I heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps moving closer. Then silence. My heart hammered as I stared at the zipper of the tent. Slowly, so slowly, the metal teeth began to part. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then I saw it. Our tent door inching open, the zipper sliding down in careful, deliberate movements. Before I could even scream, my father snapped on his flashlight. Time, 0.95 yen. In that split second, the beam caught a figure crouched outside. It was thin, pale, and completely naked. The moment the light hit, the figure bolted, sprinting toward the trees with an animal-like speed, vanishing into the black forest without a sound. The sight of that body, bony, almost skeletal, burned itself into my mind. We didn't wait for another chance encounter. As soon as the sun rose, we tore down the camp in silence, our nerves frayed to the breaking point. On the way out, we stopped at the ranger station to report what had happened. The ranger listened, nodded grimly, and said we weren't the first. There had been other reports, a man, maybe more than one, living wild in those wood, time bomb 195s. People had described him as naked, unpredictable, slipping silently into campsites at night. That was the moment it sank in. We hadn't just imagined it. We had been stalked. And whoever he wasn't simply lost. He was out there, choosing to watch.